Whoa, you mean we're actually doing this thing right now? No way. What's going on, y'all? Hobdi here. Feels great to say that again. It's definitely been a minute. If you're new to the channel, it's been about 10 months, which is kind of crazy. That's a really long time. Sorry to hold out on y'all, but just editing these videos takes a lot of time. I just transferred from like a local school to Georgia Tech this year, which is pretty rigorous. So my original goal was to try and finish the truck before I transferred, before I moved away to college, before I lost access to my tools, shop, whatever. The truck was supposed to be running and driving. But I had a lot of setbacks and issues throughout the summer. I had a serious amount of issues with the guy who built my motor. More on that later, but it cost me a lot of time, and I got into this really big time crunch where I'm like, okay, like so many weeks left until I gotta leave for school, and I just got to this point where I was like, alright, if I have time to work on the YouTube channel, like I have time to go turn wrenches on the truck. So what this led to is just me getting behind on videos. It really sucks with this video because I originally intended for this engine video to be like 5 different videos. One where, you know, I got the motor, I picked it up. One was supposed to be all about the machine shop and the work he did. One was supposed to be about accessories being mounted. One was supposed to be about the fuel system, getting the motor in the truck, you know, test fire prep, actually firing the motor. You know, it was supposed to be like separated, and it was supposed to make sense and be all chronological and edited. But basically I just got to the point where I stopped editing footage, but I kept recording for a while. So I got to the point where I couldn't keep track of what was what. Like I just had to bounce around. I had to stay productive. I couldn't stop working on something. So basically what happened here is I just kept recording, and my videos just got all out of whack, and it just became too much to separate. So what I've done here is I've just uploaded all my footage chronologically into one video, and I've just edited the best I could. So that's what you see here. This video is 2 hours long, but I started with 36 hours of footage. It was a crazy amount to edit and like break down and speed up, and it took me like 36 hours of footage, and I had to watch like every second of it, and it took forever. It took me months to edit, dealing with school and work and all that nonsense. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the result. It may not be perfect in certain spots. You know, it's not the best editing in the world, but this video basically covers everything from getting a short block to firing a motor. So for anyone that may have been in the same situation I was last year with some mechanical know-how, but never really having done it before, this covers a lot of nuances because I really tried my best not to skip anything. You see me turn pretty much every single bolt on this motor, every single thing I do. You know, you saw me put in the fuel injectors, mount the fuel rails, coil packs, spark plugs, plug wires, all my motor mounts. Like I didn't really skip any detail because all of this was like a first time for me, so I wanted that available for anyone that could watch. It could be used as a good reference or maybe just entertainment to watch. But I'm gonna stop talking now. Y'all enjoy the video. Just know I just worked super hard on it, and if you enjoy it, you know, you let me know in the comments. This is a big effort for me, so appreciate y'all. Hobdi out. What's going on, y'all? Hobdi here. In this episode, we are finally picking up the motor. I'm excited. I really am. It's been 2 months. I have not seen the motor since I dropped it off. I dropped it off on like April 10th. It's currently May 6th. Got a whole bunch of work done to it, and you know, it should be fully painted, same color scheme as the truck. It should be a black block, and then I think we went with candy apple red valve covers. I haven't seen the paint. I haven't seen anything. Alright, y'all, I'm in the truck now, headed over there. I kind of brought a little note sheet. I wrote down a bunch of, you know, things I want to ask them, you know, my build sheet, first startup, break-in period, etc., and some other miscellaneous questions. So I just want to make sure I got all my bases covered, and here we go. Oh, yeah. Woo! I'm about wore out. Alright, y'all, so let's kind of talk to y'all about the motor for a second. Let's grab a notepad right here. So I went over there, picked it up. It looks good. I'm not really in love with this red. I don't know if you can tell, but I don't know. The red just, it doesn't fit. It doesn't match. The original plan was to paint the block and the heads all in the red color, and then do the valve covers in black. That would kind of match the frame. But basically he told me this paint just sucked and that it wasn't going to stick to the block or the heads. So we went black on the block. I guess we didn't paint the heads. Honestly, that's fine. I think it looks better as it is. I really don't like the red. So it's not too huge of a deal because when we put the intake on it, the valley cover will be hidden. And then once I get like power steering right here, alternator, air conditioning, you're not going to be able to see any of this crap anyway. So it'll be alright. So I'll probably paint the valve covers black. So you'll see that there's only one valve cover on here right now. Basically he said that, so I got a Brian Tooley like trunnion kit for these. So basically it makes the rocker arms a little bit wider. And he said with the valve cover I had that there's like slots in it and that it won't, it wouldn't clear. So basically I just got to either modify the valve cover I have or just get another one. That's not too big of a deal. You know, and I'll just throw a picture of it up on the screen so I don't have to move the camera. But you can see the valve springs. They're shiny. They're titanium apparently. They are PAC dual titanium 660 springs. He said they're just pretty much the best of the best that you can get. So he said realistically this motor could handle like 8,000 RPMs. We're not going to go that high though. We're going to go to like 6,500. But he said realistically, you know, if it was going in like a drift car or something, he said I could run this at 72 all day. But it's going in a truck, so 65. So okay, so for the big news, I asked him how much horsepower he thought this thing was going to make all motor. You know, we sat there and we talked about it, and he said on E85 that this thing will make 600 motor. What? Like, I was like, I'm like really surprised by that number. I was kind of scared. I was talking to another like guy. He's a little bit older, but I was talking to some guy from work, and you know, we were discussing it. And we thought we were gonna make like 450, maybe 500. Pretty surprised by 600. I guess those forged internals help something, or you know. But yeah, I was really excited about it when I heard that number. Now I'm just tired, and I'm like kind of anticlimactic. I know. But geez, 600 horsepower, man. Like that's gonna do some damage. That honestly, you know, almost makes me want to reconsider this turbo. If the end goal is like 500 horse to the wheels, a turbo getting us up to like 800 might be overkill. So we'll just see. We'll see. But I'm really happy to have this back. So let me go over my notes here. So basically, he recommended I run Valvoline VR1 10W30. It's their racing oil. We're going to get some TR6 plugs from him. The motor went with a flex plate there and did not come back with the flex plate. So I'm going to have to go back up there and get a flex plate, get my flex plate from him. He recommends I run a 180 instead of the 190 or 195 thermostat. I don't think I really have any problem with cooling. I got freaking ginormous radiator back there. But he did recommend I run 180, so I'll look into that. Ask my tuner what they think I should run. So for my like initial startup procedure, he told me to basically pull the ignition. So like either pull the crank or the cam position sensor so there's no ignition, and then kind of turn the motor over with the starter and let it build some oil pressure. Then you know, hook the ignition back up. And then you kind of heat soak the engine twice. So he said, you know, get it up to run it, let it idle up to temperature, and then let it cool off. And then he said start it up again and let it get up to temperature again, but this time kind of give it some revs, run it at some different RPM ranges. He said to run, I don't know what this means, but he said to run it fat. He said to run it like around 13 to 1. So I think that basically means fuel. He said you don't want to run it lean, but you don't want to wash out the rings either. So well, we've got the Holley like self-learning system. So I don't really know what that looks like right now, but I wrote it down 13 to 1. So we'll figure that out when we get there. He said run the engine for 500 miles just about and then change the oil and filter. He said run a Wix something 42 anti-drain back filter. He said the first 3 of the part number was Wix and then the last 2 numbers was 42. So I'll just look for the anti-drain back filter. He recommends I run a mechanical oil pressure sensor instead of the electrical. And that's really it. I don't have my build sheet yet. He didn't have it printed out on paper. He's in the middle of moving shops right now, so he's going to email me the PDF when he gets the chance. Still waiting to hear back from that, but man, it's kind of crazy. 600 horsepower, right? Like, man, the paint's already starting to flake off right here, it looks like. I mean, I don't know. I kind of wanted to build this motor to the point where I want to be able to go to a car show and pop the hood and, you know, flex a little, you know. It's not meant to be perfect, you know. I'm not Richard Rawlings building, you know, mint, you know, restoration, you know. I'm a freaking college student in a garage, right? But I am going to try and keep this clean and, you know, the end goal here is to have something pretty to look at in the engine bay. I could even make like a sleeper with the truck. I was looking at some old pictures of it with these steel wheels before I painted them black. Yeah, I'll throw a picture up on the screen. But I mean, if I put the bed back on and I went back to those steel wheels, this truck would be a total sleeper. Alright, I'm not sure why Home Dog didn't just do this himself, but I was able to just snap this plastic piece out of the valve cover. Looks like one was already missing. You can see on the valve cover the dirty spot where it was. Doesn't really look like it was doing anything important. Maybe it was just like a baffle or something. But I mean, now it just slides right over, no problem. So for some reason, Rock Auto just decided to send me a bunch of magnets. I wonder if it has anything to do with all these parts here behind me. Alright, well that was a little cringe, I know, but I had to. So I ordered a bunch of stuff this week since I picked up the motor. I got pretty much all new sensors, so I got 2 NOx sensors, an aux sensor harness, the temperature sender unit, got like an oil pressure sensor, don't even know, and then I have a crank and cam position sensor, oil filter, and this is the oil content level sensor. This is a plug for the oil pan. We got a new starter, new alternator, dipstick and dipstick tube, because I tore mine up tearing this down. Alright, so the goal for today is to try and get some of those parts on the motor. I had originally planned on taking all this crap off and like painting it black and red and this and that. Honestly, I'm not really loving the red, so I'm just going to cover that up. And I was going to paint all the accessories and stuff black too, but I think it's going to be a lot of work, and I'm in like a really big crunch now to get everything done. This motor has to be done before I go back to school, or the truck has to be done. So at this point, I'm just going to slap it all together. I had I either went new on the parts or on the brackets, or I had them clean. So I had the power steering pump and that bracket sent to the shop to be cleaned, and I'll paint it silver, the same color as the block. But the rest of this, it's basically just going to be a black and silver engine. The only thing I am going to paint is I want to pull the valve covers off, and I want to paint it the same color as the block. You're looking at the back of the block right now, so this is not painted for some reason. I guess he just figured no one would see it, which is fine, whatever. But the front of the block is nice, and I'll throw up a picture, but it's nice and gloss black. So that's kind of the goal for the motors, for everything to be black and silver. So let's get started by throwing some NOx sensors in here. Alright, so I'll throw the part numbers up on the screen, but NOx sensor goes in. It's a 22 millimeter bolt, and then it's supposed to be torqued to 15 foot-pounds. Alright, well I was going to do the steam line kit next, but I'm missing the hardware for that. And then I was going to do the crank position sensor, but I'm also missing the hardware for it. So the next thing I'm going to throw on is the oil fill content level sensor. It's just a plug that blocks that hole off in the oil pan.
I forgot to mention that there is an O-ring that came with this. I slid it over the bolt, so there is an O-ring on this to help it seal. The torque spec on this is 115 inch-pounds, or about 9.5 foot-pounds. I don't have the bolt for the cam position sensor either. Alright, next I got my oil pressure sensor. It's just going to go right here. And I found two different torque specs online. Some people are saying 15 foot-pounds, and some people are saying 26. I can't find a definite answer, so I'm just going to split it right in the middle at 20. So my socket is hitting this valley cover gasket, and it's not fitting in here. It's too thick. Hey, what's going on, y'all? Slight change of plans here. I know I talked up doing a bunch of double fuel pump stuff and how we're gonna get everything ready for the turbo. I've kind of decided. Well, I've just realized that I really only have 7 weeks left to finish this truck before I go back to school, and I'm in a huge crunch right now. So I'm realizing that the turbo probably isn't going to happen this summer, and then I really just need to speed things along. So kind of my current plan is to just take one of the fuel pumps and drop it into the stock fuel sending unit. I believe it is just a drop-in application, and then I can just use some adapters instead of trying to cut everything up and make it cumbersome. And I don't really need 2 fuel pumps if I'm stock right now. So the kind of downside to this is that when I do go turbo, it was supposed to be just like a plug-and-play, bolt-up kind of deal. But now I'll probably have to pull the bed again to get access to the fuel tank. But I mean, it's a small price to pay because I need the truck done ASAP. So I'm gonna get to work on this. All right, so here is our new fuel pump and our new fuel sending unit. All this stuff came right here. It came with the fuel sending unit. Then I've got the box for the fuel pump right there. Workbench is a bit of a mess right now, but it'll buff. So basically, I'm gonna take this. And I believe this is just going to slide over this guy like so. And it should line it up. Put this guy on first. So we have that, and then we have this. Let's take this and slide that on. Got it. Take the fuel pump and the air motive came with these inlet things. I'm going to use the one that came with the air motive pump. Came with some hose and some hose clamps, but I'll more than likely just use the one that came with the pump, and then some new of these guys. I'm going to go shorten it. So this is what came with the sending unit. This came with the air motive. I'm going to go shorten the air motive to be just a little bit longer than that one. Okay, so with this thing fully seated, I'm still looking a little long on the hose. So I've got one of these gauge it charts here to measure gauges and bolts and whatnot. So I'm measuring the diameter of the wire that came with the fuel pump. It's landing at right about 12. So I'm going to go on Amazon, and instead of drilling this out and trying to do like a grommet and stuff, they sell electrical bulkhead connectors for this application. So I'm just going to get one that accepts 12 and 14 gauge wires, and I'll just be able to drill something out here on the hat and make this plug and play. Alright, so I had gone to AutoZone and gotten a thinner socket thinking that would work. It did not, but now I'm realizing that I have a file, so I'm just going to file down the edge of that gasket right there. Alright, so I got this file down, so now we're going to run this to about 20 foot-pounds. Alright y'all, so we're going to install the coolant temperature sensor now. We're going to run this one down to about 15 foot-pounds. The diameter of this is a lot smaller than the coolant or the oil pressure sensor, which we just installed. That one's a lot bigger, and it's also made of a different material. So that one's probably safer to run up to a higher torque, but this one I'm not going to do any higher than 15. I'm using a 19mm socket. What's going on, y'all? Today is Saturday. It's probably been about a week since the last clip. I've got my hands on some of the bolts we needed, so I've got like the crank position, cam position sensor bolts. I only got 2 of the steam line bolts, so basically I can block off the rear. I'm going to fit up the front. I don't know if I'm going to be able to put the intake on or not today, because I don't know if I can access that front steam port with the intake on. So we'll just kind of have to figure that out. And then I got the flex plate back and some of the bolts that came with it, not all of them. So I'll be able to stick the flex plate on there in the starter. I just won't be able to torque it down. Pouring outside right now, so I don't know if this is going to happen or not today, but the goal is to dress up this engine and get it back inside the get it mounted on the frame today. Before I can do that, I need to finish mounting all these sensors, get the flex plate on there and get the intake on there, which should be pretty reasonable. I wanted to take the intake out and hose it off. I don't know if I want to go do that in the rain now, so we'll see where we get to. Alright, so I'm going to start with the crank position sensor. Looks like this right here, and then it says that I need to lubricate the O-ring with some fresh oil so that way it fully seats, and then we're going to torque it to about 18 foot-pounds. So it's hard to record, but I'm straight up just sticking my finger in this oil, and then I'm going to rub my finger on the O-ring. Kind of work it in there, and then it just kind of pops in. Alright, here is what the bolt looks like, and I'm just going to hand thread it in. Alright, so I've got my camshaft position sensor here. I'm going to do the same thing as last time as the crank. I'm just going to oil this up with my finger, and then we're going to drop it down, and it's going to be about to 18 foot-pounds as well. There we go, I just felt it pop into place, and this is what the bolt looks like for my camshaft position sensor. Alright, I got my dipstick tube here. It too has an O-ring on it, so I went ahead and just dumped the whole thing in oil, so it should slide right in there. Alright, well it looks like the old dipstick had broken off in there. I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with that. I'm probably going to have to drop the pan and then knock it out from the inside with some kind of punt. Don't know how I'm going to deal with that, but for now I'm going to move on to these coolant crossover and the block off things. These are just going to go on like so, and then they have bolts that are going to be torqued down to 106 inch-pounds, which is about 9 foot-pounds. It's like 8.83. Alright, so now we're going to take a peek at how the accessory bracket here mounts up. Let's see, which side faces out? I'm going to assume it goes like this. We'll slide our first bolt in down here. Kind of wish I brought these home and clean the bolts up, but it'll buff. So I'm just going to start that guy in right there. I got 4 mounting bolts, and then it looks like I've got 2 that go up here. Alright, cool. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I held them all out next to each other before I started. Looks like these were all the same. Alright, looks like the torque spec for these guys is about 37 foot-pounds. Alright, now I'm going to start working on getting the alternator mounted. I have a bracket kit brought from like LS. Some LS, I'll throw a picture of it up on the screen, but some LS mount kit. Here's the instructions that came with it. It basically lets me reuse my factory AC from the OBS truck. So I'm going to start working on these brackets. I got a whole bunch of bolts and brackets and pieces on the floor down here. So I'm going to piece that together, and then I'll talk through putting it on the motor. Alright y'all, so I took a quick breather. The rain had died down a little bit, so I grabbed some help and we flipped the truck around in here. So that way now the front of the truck is on the inside, and I can just drop the motor into the bay, because it's going to rain all weekend. And then I also ran out to AutoZone and I got myself another oil pan gasket. I had posted a picture of that dipstick tube on Facebook, and the old dipstick is just stuck in there. So what I'm about to do is I'm about to pull the pan, and I'm going to try and look at it from the inside, and hopefully I can just punch it out and everything will be okay. Alright, so actually some guys on Facebook told me to just stick a tap in it and try to pull it out that way. I figure why not try and save the 60 bucks for the gasket. So I'm going to try it this way. Worst case scenario is I end up pulling the pan anyway. Alright, one thing that's on our side is it looks like the oil tube is actually pretty accessible. I was worried it was going to be like way up there, but it's actually this little piece that you can just barely see right there. So I'm just going to stick a punch in there and try and knock that out. Alright, well there is my lovely dipstick tube piece that had broken off in there. So I'm going to push a paper towel through there. What kind of sucks here is that I tried tapping it first, so there might be some metal shavings in here. I flipped it upside down. I did most of the tapping while it was like this, but I did do some while it was upright. Hopefully there's not any metal shavings in there. I don't really see any in the pan. I'll wipe out the pan too, because when it was upright it should have fallen straight into the pan, and the pan is kind of oily, so it should have gotten stuck there. So I'm going to clean out this hole, get some of any shavings left in there cleaned out, and then I'm going to realign the pan and put our new gasket on. Now that that's handled, let me test fit the new dipstick. Oh yeah, see, now that goes right in there. Alright, so when you reinstall this oil pan, basically there's 4 corners where the front cover, rear cover, and then the block made up. And these 4 corners need to be hit with silicone. So I'm just going to go through here and make sure I hit all 4 of these corners. I'm going to have to scrape some of the old silicone out first. Alright, so I ran to AutoZone and I grabbed some black RTV. It's a silicone gasket maker. And I'm going to put some in every corner where the seams are. And I'm going to kind of like start in and then work my way out. Basically, I don't want any of this stuff getting in the crankcase. I want it all to be on the outside. Alright, so I've been scratching my head trying to make sure I got this thing lined up right. I've got it pretty much flush with the back of the block. I mean, I don't really know what else I can do here. I'll throw some pictures up, but I ran a straight edge from here to here. I mean, it looks about right. So I'm just going to tighten it down. All the bolts are 18 foot-pounds except for these. These are 106 inch-pounds, which I'm just going to round up to 9 foot-pounds. Well, now one of the front oil pan bolts. Alright y'all, so today's Sunday. I got on Facebook last night and did a little bit of research. Some of the guys are telling me that this front cover, these bolts are all basically supposed to be the same size. So the 2 front bolts that are shorter, basically I can use these longer bolts in those holes. So since the hole I stripped out is with the shorter bolt, I should be able to take one of these longer bolts and hopefully put it in this hole and catch a few threads, and then maybe I can actually resolve this without doing without having to tap anything or like helicoil or any of that. So I'm going to take this bolt back out, I'm going to blow it out. I am going to run a tap through it just to kind of clean up the hole a little bit, and then I'm going to try running one of these other longer bolts through it and just take this shorter bolt and put it in the other hole, and hopefully everything just evens out. Just going to clean these bolts up with a M8 by 125 die. Alright, well, moment of truth on whether or not this thing is actually going to tighten down for me. So I realized I also made another critical error. That big torque wrench I was using yesterday is only certified 20 to 100 foot-pounds. So I went and got myself a little 1/4 inch pound torque wrench. And I'm only gonna torque these two guys to like, I'm gonna torque that one to probably like 12 inch-pounds, or not 12, 12 foot-pounds, and this one's gonna go to like 10 foot-pounds. Man, I want to say that's snug right there. I don't even want to go up anymore. Oh, it's kind of snug. Do I risk going? Like, I don't want it to be too little. Jeez. All right, we're sending it to 10. Oh, this is nerve-wracking. Oh, okay. It clicked at 10. It clicked at 10. We're keeping it there. All right, y'all. So switching gears back to this, I have everything laid out in order of how this is, of all the parts that came with this. So basically, item 1, I used my caliper and I measured these all out just to be sure everything's right. So item 1, you're going to have these 3 spacer tubes, 2.544, followed by 210, followed by 2 of these 2.3 inch ones. You got your tensioner, you got your 3 M10 by 80 bolts, 2 M10 by 150. You'll have your 1 M10 by 90, your 1 M10 by 130. Then over here, item number 9, you'll have your 2 M10 nuts. You'll have your Gates belt. You'll have your truck alternator. So there is 2 versions of this. This is the 145 amp. I believe there's also the 110 amp. I don't know if there's any difference there, but it does specify the large case alternator. Then you've got your front plate, your rear plate. You got 4 spacer tubes. You got these 4 M10 bolts by 110. So then number 16, I'm not really sure. There's kind of a discrepancy here. It says that there's supposed to be 2 more 1.5 inch steel plate spacers. And I don't have those, but I do have this black steel plate here, and it does have spacers in here. And I measured these out to be about 1.5 inches. So I mean, those are stuck in there, right? Like, those are welded, so I don't really know why that would be on the sheet as their own item. But I'm just going to assume that 16 is these 2. Alright, now to try and start assembling this thing on the ground. So I've got this front plate on, and I've basically lined it up on here, and I've got all my bolts sticking through. So on the back side here, you can see that these 2 nuts that come with it are actually what hold the front and 2 together. First few bolts that you probably want to start out with is you want to put this front case, the front plate on. You want to put these top 2 corner bolts in to kind of line it up with the alternator. And then you want to make sure you get this nut and then this nut on, and then this becomes a lot more rigid. It gets a lot easier to deal with. So I think that some of this hardware is actually left over for the actual AC bracket. I got some spacers left here. I've got 4 bolts left and a bunch of smaller spacers. This is the only instruction sheet that really came with it, so I guess I'll just bolt the air conditioning unit up from a picture. Alright, y'all, I got this set up, and I think I've got it set up right. Basically, how you want to set this up is you're going to have 3 long bolts. Those were your 150s, I believe. Or you're going to have 2 long bolts, 2 150s. One's going to go through the middle of this tensioner. One's going to go at the bottom here. As far as these sleeves go, or these spacers, your 2-inch ones are basically what's going to go in between these 2 plates. That's going to set the distance. That's going to go here and here. This bolt is going to have 2 spacers on it. It's going to have, this distance, and then it's going to have this long one over here. This one up here, same thing. Well, actually, this one goes through the alternator, and then it'll have a long one out here. This one just kind of sits here and it's chilling, and it's just got a spacer on it. The first bolt you have to put in is this one, because it goes on the inside and then it comes out, and then it's going to use your 3rd long spacer. Then you've got these 2 nuts back here. These are, once you get these on, it really adds some rigidity. So you can basically skip this one. You have to do this one before you do the tensioner, obviously. So I'll just kind of pan over it and show you, because I know I'm not explaining this too awesome, but this is what it looks like. There's no torque specs or anything listed with this, so I'm just going to bring those 2 nuts to snug, and then I'm going to try and pick the whole thing up at once and get it mounted. We'll see how this goes. So I got this one threaded in by finger. So what's really killing me here is this tensioner. It has a bolt under it. And it's this bolt that's hanging everything else up that I can't get to. Honestly, this thing probably needs to go on last. It's just in the way. Alright, so I got it on completely. I don't have like an exact torque spec. I'd say all the bolts are about 10 or 12 right now. I had to back this one in and out a couple times and blow the hole out. Looks like the hole was kind of gunked up, but got it figured out. So this is how it's assembled. If I were to do this again, I would actually put it together on the engine. So I would start with the back plate, and then I would start with this one bolt that's on the inside, and I would bolt it up here kind of loosely, and then you can kind of start with these next two bolts and this one right here, and you should be able to basically go around the outside and then drop the alternator in last. I think I made the mistake of putting it together on the floor, and really I think you can drop. I think with the spacers, they space it out perfectly, so I can unbolt the alternator with just two bolts if I wanted to. So give that a try. Alright, so there's no instructions for this part, but it actually looks pretty self-explanatory. You've got these two bolts up here, so you'll just take those out. And this guy should just drop in right there. And then you have your four mounting bolts for your AC compressor. Pushing's need a quick love tap. Alright, so while it's not raining for a minute, I'm going to pop these valve covers off. I'm going to just slap them with some 320 grit and then hit them with that black enamel. So these have already been sanded down and wiped down with some alcohol. Alright, so while I've got the paint drying behind me, I'm going to start working on cleaning this up. It's covered in grime, and then the bottom of it is also covered in grime, so I don't want to put this dirty intake over the basically all over all my intake ports where it's all nice and clean. Alright, so I've got the valve covers painted and drying, and I got the intake manifold drying from being washed. So the next thing on the to-do list here is I've got a little block-off plate for this oil area. This is just temporary. Eventually I will run my oil cooler lines there and whatnot. But for the time being, I'm just going to block this off so I can get the motor started. Came with a little O-ring. I believe the general consensus is don't put O-rings in dry. So I'm going to dab some oil on this, stick this in here, and I'm just going to tighten this in there finger tight. Okay, got a little bit of oil on it now. Alright, I didn't do the best job painting these, but not the worst job either. I did alright. I think I might have missed a few spots, but it'll buff. The reason I could tell the difference between these two valve covers so easily is because I just looked at the baffle in here. The passenger side cover is new because apparently the baffle is a common issue with these. Apparently the baffle in the old one would clog up and there'd be no way to clean it. So if you look and you Google LS valve covers, the passenger is a lot easier to find than the driver because they still make these because they're a common problem, they're an issue, whereas those don't really need to be replaced. So I can just look on the inside here and say, oh, this is the new baffle. Okay, so I haven't torqued these down yet because I'm gonna let them cure and stuff before I put the socket on them. I've also gone in ahead. I don't have the bolts for them yet, but I've gone and sat the steam crossover in here. You can't put it on backwards because it just won't fit. It won't let you. So I'm just setting this in here for now, and then once I get the bolt, I'll actually screw it in. Okay, I forgot to show it, but I also placed the intake manifold gaskets in here. All I did was set them down, and basically there's two head bolts right here. They got a little clip, and it just pushes down over the head bolt. You could probably take the head bolt off and put the head bolt over these, but I don't think that's really necessary. And then I've taken this knock sensor, and there's a little groove right here in the back of the engine, and I've just kind of routed the wire into there. So it should be ready for me to set the intake up on here. You can see I can still get to these two coolant bolts just barely. But I'm not going to torque this down for now. I actually have to go. Father's Day dinner, you know, stuff like that. So I'm going to leave this like this, or I'm going to leave it like this for the night. And I'll torque the valve cover and the intake down tomorrow. What's going on, y'all? So today is Monday. I'm starting to get a little sketched out by this stand. It's kind of tilting forward some. And so I really just want to get this motor on the frame. There's still a bunch of stuff to do up here with, you know, coil packs, spark plugs, fuel rails, whatever. But honestly, those can all be done while it's on the frame. So my next priority is going to be getting the power steering pump mounted. That came in the mail today. And then I'm going to put the motor mounts on, and I should be good to get this thing mounted. I think those are the only really big things that need to be done on the stand. And then everything else can be done right there on the frame. So this is actually surprisingly straightforward to reinstall. Probably the easiest thing to go back on the motor yet. I'm just going to slide this guy right up here, line up the bolt holes, get it started by hand. You know, I probably jinxed myself, right? I said this was going to be the easiest part. Now watch me struggle to get the pulley on. Alright, so I've got these three bolts hand threaded in, and there's a fourth bolt hole here. I don't have anything that goes there. I don't actually know if like that's for like a different car or something. So I watched a YouTube video on it. No idea. But I did watch a YouTube video, and they said I needed this bracket off my old power steering pump. So glad I caught that. So I pulled this off the old one and some hardware. I'm going to spray these down real quick, and then they'll go on the back here. Alright, so as far as motor mounts go, I have the Dirty Dingo 8898 LS swap motor mounts. Seem to be a pretty nice set. They're stamped passenger and driver side. They got an arrow saying which way is front and back. The only problem I have here is I'm missing a bolt and a lock washer. I've been sitting on this mount kit for like over a year now, so there's, it might have just gotten lost anywhere, honestly. So I'm going to bolt them up, and I'm just going to run 3 bolts on one side. It should be fine to mount, but before I actually start the motor, I'll make sure to get this 4th bolt. So it says that there's instructions online, but really there's not. There's like a generic one-fits-all instruction sheet on there. And even then, I don't think it's right, because I think these will bolt on, and then these two right here will just go right over my motor mounts over there. Whereas their instructions say I have to use the original. Their generic instructions say I might have to reuse the original motor mount, but this is what originally came off the 5.7, and there's no way for me to attach this onto here, and these two fit perfectly over the clamshell, so I can only assume that's how it goes. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to run this bolt in and out of these holes a few times and blow all the holes out. I was supposed to have all these threads chased by my machinist, but it got painted over since then, so I'm just going to make sure everything threads, you know, smoothly the way it's supposed to. Alright, So now I've got these hand tight on both sides. I'm just gonna go around with the tape measure, and I'm going to make sure they're even, and then I'll snug them up. I'm not gonna torque them down because I'll probably have to slide it around a little bit and get it positioned right on the frame. Moving a little backwards here, I'm taking the AC compressor and possibly the intake off. That way I can run a chain through here and get this thing on the frame. And then this alternator bolt right here, I'll use one on the alternator, or the AC bracket now. I'll use one here, and then the other one's going to thread into the back of the head over here. I just hand threaded this in there, so this should work. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and slip the flywheel on while I can right now. I'm not going to torque it down or put any thread locker on these bolts yet. I just don't know how easy it's going to be to slide the flywheel itself in and out later. So I'm just going to stick it on here for now, and then I can bolt it up, re-bolt it later. Hey Hunter. Let me borrow you for half a second. Trying to get this guy over this, so I'm going to lower it at the hoist, but I need two hands to lower it, so basically I'm going to lower it and drop it down, and if you can shove this through those. See? Alright, so I've got it in for the most part. It helps if you have two hands here, but I don't think it's entirely necessary. So kind of one thing I'm running into right now is this bolt I used in the back is so long that when I try to set it down entirely, this bolt's hitting the firewall. So I'm going to try and loosen the motor mounts and sliding the motor forward some, and hopefully I can get that bolt out of there. Alright, so I had a brief moment of panic, so I was like, why is the engine going in at such an angle? I guess it makes sense, right? Like, I don't have the transmission hooked up, there's no exhaust, there's nothing to really hold the engine level. I've pulled transmissions and transfer cases and stuff from the truck and the Jeep before, and it angled. I didn't notice that it was so dramatic. So I did have like a moment of heart failure, but this is normal. Everyone's saying the engine mounts will hold. So I'm still stuck with that bolt back there. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get it out. I'm going to try pulling this up level and see how much space that gives me. So if I basically get over here and kind of push this level, I don't know if that's going to give me more room. Oh man, you know, if I just put the floor jack under there, that might be enough to get that bolt out, and then I just leave the motor like this. Alright y'all, so today is Tuesday. I went and got some bolts. I got my flex plate bolts, and I went to the machine shop to pick up my coolant crossover bolts, and this dude gave me a crooked, you know, it's like, it's a sad bolt. So they're pretty much trash, and then he grinded another one down because it was too long, and I just don't want to use that either. So I've ordered 2 new bolts for the coolant crossover. And then I've got a couple more things I'd like to do today. I realized the starter, oh well, I couldn't put the starter on because I don't have the flex plate, whatever. So the first thing I'm going to do is I posted this cricket situation on Facebook, and the first thing I'm going to do is run a ratchet strap under the oil pan into the frame rails, and some people do that to hold their motor straight while they're, you know, in this process right here. So we're going to do that. We're going to level out the motor. I'd like to torque down the flex plate. And then I got a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff that you'll see. Oh shit. So all I've done is run a strap from the control arm under the motor and pretty much over here. Alright, so I'm going to try bolting up this flywheel, but to be honest, I don't know how I'm going to hold it. When I try to torque it down, if it starts turning on me, I might have to call someone down here to help me, I don't know. Alright, so I went and added a jack stand down there because I thought it'd be kind of unfortunate if an engine fell on my face. And then I'm going to grab some red Loctite. I probably should use blue or something for this, but red is all I have on hand, and I hopefully shouldn't have to take the flex plate off again anyhow. So I'm going to throw some, the two new bolts I got came with blue Loctite on them, but the red bolts, or the bolts I already had, I cleaned off, so there's nothing on them. So I'm just going to dab them with some red, and then I'll torque them all down. Alright, so that was a little sketchy at first. I have like PTSD from stripping out the oil pan bolt, so anything with the torque wrench, I'm just like, eh. So I started real slow. The first two bolts took me a minute because I was like easing up, and I ended up dropping the torque wrench down to like 50, 60, 70. So basically I torqued all the bolts in a star, and I started them all at 20, and then I went to like 37 and then 74, but on those first two bolts I kind of took steps up from that 37, just because I wanted to make sure the torque wrench was going to click. So, because I felt like I was really like wailing on them, and they just, it wasn't clicking, and then like the last three, it felt a lot easier, because I don't know if it's because I was just like getting there quicker, but torque wrench clicked at 74 for all of them. As I went through, I kind of used like a piece of tape on, I put a piece of tape on each one, because as you're torquing down on them, the flywheels, it's rotating a little bit, and I didn't want it to get disorientated on which ones I haven't torqued. So I just put some tape on it. I didn't need any kind of special holder tool or anything. You know, I might be a little bit younger than some of y'all watching this, but I mean, I was able to just, you know, torque it with one arm and then basically hold the flywheel with my other hand. So it wasn't too bad. If you're a little bit older, you might need something though. Alright, so the valve covers get torqued to 106 inch-pounds. I'm going to knock those out real quick. Alright, so I was looking up torque specs for the alternator here. I can't really find anything. The accessory bracket is for 37 foot-pounds, and being that these bolts both go into the heads, I have to assume that those are 37 foot-pounds as well. Because, you know, these all go into the head right here. That goes into the block. The only one I'm kind of questioning is this one right here, because this one goes into the water pump. But, I mean, it's the same bolt and the same size, so I'm just going to run them all down to 37 foot-pounds. If I break anything, I'm throwing the whole truck away. Okay, actually, I'm just going to do this one to 20 foot-pounds because it goes into the water pump, and then these are 17. So these are two different sizes, and I just realized that. These are also going to 37 foot-pounds. Since these AC bolts are so visible, they're at the very top of the motor, and I can just pull them out. I'm actually going to take these home and clean them up. This guy's going to go on at 37 foot-pounds as well. Alright, so I've got my new power steering pump pulley here. Just going to slide this in. I put some oil on the bolt just so it goes in smooth. That kind of felt like it bottomed out right there, but it's not lined up with nothing. Man, I think I just really messed up. I think I just put this on backwards. And now I think I can't get it off because it's on backwards and there's nothing to pull from. Man, I wish I was smarter sometimes. Alright, so I've got a harmonic balancer puller rigged up to this thing right now. Hopefully this will work. Hopefully it doesn't tear up my shiny new pump. This is gonna work. I believe in it. So I got the harmonic balancer pulley put on it, and I ran a zip tie around it and through the pulley, and then I ran another zip tie around these. So, I can't get to the nut now, but I'll figure that out. But there's no way this should come apart now. Alright, well, I hope I don't tear the face of this up, but this looks like it's kind of my only route right now. So this is the aftermath of pulling this pulley off. Kind of hard to tell on camera, but this pulley's ruined. Alright y'all, it's Wednesday. I had to take a little breather last night. Got a little upset about the power steering pulley. Took a break and I just kind of cleaned up the shop, put some tools away, cleaned up my workbench over here. What I'm about to start working on, I probably should have done this before I put it in the frame, is I'm going to put the starter motor back on. I'd like to get the starter and the headers on today. So I've got the old one pulled out over here. Had to dig for it in my pile of junk over here. Took me a minute. But found it. I still got the old bolts in it. So this should bolt right up. Alright, well that was actually pretty simple. I was scared that it was going to be a pain, but just those two bolts mounted right up, and then I torqued it down to 37 foot-pounds. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to work on is getting these spark plugs in. I've got some NGK TR6 4177. My tuner told me to gap these at .028. Alright, so here is one I've gapped already, and then here is one I have not yet gapped. You can see a small difference. I think they come factory at like .035 or .040, and I'm supposed to be going to .028. Alright, so I've gone through and I've set the gap on all of these, and then I've also gone through and double checked them, made sure they're all at about 28 thousandths. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to put a dab of anti-seize on all the threads here. Alright, so these spark plug wires get torqued to 11 foot-pounds, or that's about 132 inch-pounds. So I was going to do the headers next, but the bolts are pretty nasty. The threads need to be cleaned, so I'll take those home and clean those tonight. Let's bolt up this AC compressor real quick. I don't know what I ever torqued these to, so I'm going to put these down to 30 foot-pounds on the top here. Alright, so the next thing I'm looking at here are these coil packs. These spark plug wires are obviously toast, not reusing these. I'm looking at the brackets. They're all right. They're They're not bad. This one's a little bit better, but there's a little bit of rust starting on some of them. I definitely want to clean them up a little bit. I think I may take the coil packs off here and just hit this bracket with some spray paint, degrease it, and hit it with some of that black engine enamel I have. These are what's going to be right on top of the motor, so I'd like for these to look good. So I don't know if placement of these matters, like if this one can interchange for this one or not. So I'd rather just not mix them up, so I'm going to label them with some tape and this marker that I just dropped. I just want to note that when you're pulling these brackets apart, one side has a longer bolt and one side has a shorter bolt. It looks like the shorter bolt is going down towards where the spark plugs are. Alright, what's going on, y'all? Today is Saturday. I came out here the other day and I painted these brackets up. They came out alright. You know, all the rust and the grime is hidden now, but you know, it's definitely got some orange peel from the clear coat. And then I have the actual coil packs themselves with a nylon brush. I got some spark plug wires now. So I actually went to look at the motor I was going to mount them the other night, and I realized I don't have the mounting bolts for them. So I ended up getting on Facebook and searching Marketplace for, you know, GM, Part Out, Rex, Silverado, Tahoe, whatever. And I found a Suburban that was being parted out a couple miles up the road. And the guy was really cool, and I got these bolts from him. So that saved me a good headache. And now I'm kind of realizing that I'm still missing some other bolts. So I'm missing that power steering bracket bolt right there. And then I had ordered the bolts for right here. And now they were supposed to be here this week, and now they're saying July 8th, which is like another week or two, and I'm not with that. So I think I'm getting back on Facebook. I'm trying to find some more part outs. The other guy didn't really want to take too many bolts off his motor, so I'm just trying to find some bolts right now without waiting on ordering them. Just kind of sucks because a lot of the bigger yards are closed today, unless I want to go all the way into Atlanta to like pull apart or something. So I'm just trying to find some stuff locally. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and get these coil packs mounted back up. I'll be honest, these brackets really look identical. I don't really know that there's any difference between the two, but I've been keeping them separate just because. Alright, so I don't really know what the torque specs for these are, but I can't assume it's too much. So I got them all hand tight, and I'll do a quarter turn on all of them. Alright, so now I'm just going to go around and put some dielectric grease on all the ceramic parts of the spark plugs. I realized after doing a little bit more research, I realized I wasn't supposed to use anti-seize on the threads. It varies by manufacturer, but NGK actually recommends that you don't use anti-seize because they use a special coating on their threads and it can mess up the torque spec. So I've already used it and I already torqued them down, so I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to wipe it off or anything. But check with your manufacturer on whether you need to use anti-seize or not. Alright, and then I'm also going to take some grease and stick it up the boot, and then I'll take a pick and kind of spread it around the outside of the boot. Alright, so I went ahead and took some grease and I put it in both ends of the wire here. If y'all watched the video of me tearing the engine down, these wires were like fused to those spark plugs. I had to really get in there and with some channel locks and really rip these things out. So this should hopefully help with that. And if I do have to change plugs or wires or even coil packs in the near future, this should make it nice and easy to change these. So I laid all these coil wires out together and it looks like they're all the same length. I didn't do it very scientifically, but I held them all up next to each other. So I don't think it really matters where each wire goes. So I got these guys in. The top parts click, but the bottom parts are not. I don't know if I put too much grease or what's going on here, but I haven't gotten a click yet. So I got like half a click there, but not really the... Oh, that one clicked. So I can feel them pop in. It's just not like a notice. It's like a click, but it's more of a pop than a click. So I guess that's just because of the grease. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to work on installing is the Schoenfeld headers. You can see these are the 1302 LS1. They came with new gaskets and new bolts. I'm going to mount these up right now. I'm not going to torque them down quite yet. I want to see if these are going to be in the way of installing anything else. So I don't think it matters which way this gasket faces. Alright, so I'm realizing that I need to undo the coil plug wires to get these in. But thankfully we greased everything, so... So I got the header right here. I started the gasket and I got one bolt in. Alright, so I ended up having to pull the coil wires, get the headers on. I did the coil wires first because I thought the headers were going to get in the way, but whatever. And then now I'm looking at it and I realize there's a gap on the top. And I looked back and I realized we're actually contacting the frame over here with the back of the headers. So I'm going to have to slide the motor back a little bit so I can get the headers bolted on all the way. Alright, so I'm done. I'm looking at this now and I just realized, oh crap, these motor mounts are already as far forward as they'll go. You'll see the motor mounts right here are slotted and this bolt right here can go back, but it's already at the front of this bracket, so I can't move the engine any further back. So what I'm thinking this is, because everyone says these are the headers to run, is just because the engine was at such an angle, because obviously now that it's more leveled out, these aren't contacting anymore. There's just barely a little bit of clearance there. So kind of what I'm thinking is I tighten this ratchet strap up some, and then I got under there and I've got a jack stand under there. Pulled it out, I bumped it up a notch, and then kind of wedged it in there. So if I let off on this now, oh yeah, hopefully this motor stays relatively level. And hopefully this isn't a problem down the road. I don't know what I'll do. Alright, so back in here I've probably got like ½ an inch of clearance. I can't even stick my finger in there, but it does clear. So I'm going to tighten up the bolts now. I'm not going to torque them fully, just get them snug and put the spark plug wires back on. Alright, I know I said I wasn't going to torque these, but there's a gap right here on this side of the headers. I can literally see light through the top of the headers, so it's all the way through. I don't know if the header gasket or the header itself is warped, but I want to see if it kind of goes away when I torque it down. So I'm going to start by torquing these to about 10 or 11 foot-pounds, and then I'll go up to 18. Alright, so I've got these all torqued down to about 16 foot-pounds. I don't know if you can see this or not, but there's a little... You can see it's sealed through here, it's sealed, and then there's a small gap right there, and then we're good through back here. I'm going to run it and see if maybe like on my first startup, maybe these just need to get up to 10, settle, and then retorque, so we'll see. Alright, well now what I'm running into is that the strap down there is in the way of the headers. So I'm going to undo the strap and hopefully the engine just sits on the jack I got down there. Alright y'all, I want to show you something real quick. I went to go put my spark plug wires back on and I was having a bunch of difficulty with this one. It wouldn't click. I kept pushing it on, taking it off. I switched wires from coil pack to coil pack. I just could not get the spark plug to click. So I realized on the back side, the actual clip in there, the metal clip, was pulling out through the back. And I was like, okay, so I took a little pick and I pushed it back in a little bit, and it still wouldn't click. So I started holding it up to the other wires, and I was like, man, these are all supposed to be the same length. Why is this one so much longer? So when I was pulling these boots out, I actually pulled the boot up the wire. Or I'm sorry, when I was pulling these boots out, this wire had somehow gotten pulled out as well. So basically the wire had pulled out through the back of the boot, and so when I would try to reinstall this, there was this much boot, but the clip was all the way at the top. So there was too much boot in the way for the spark plug to really engage. So all I did here is I took a flathead and I stuck it in here, and you can feel that there's like a metal clip in there, and I just pushed the metal clip all the way in as far as it would go. And now the clip is where it's supposed to be, and it'll actually engage and clip onto the spark plug. Alright, so I went and hit up another parts truck. I got the 2 coolant crossover bolts that I needed and the power steering pump bolt that I needed. He didn't want to give me one of his valve cover bolts, so that's the only one I'm missing right now. Dirty Dingo shipped me another motor mount bolt, so I'm all caught up there. And now I've got another power steering pump pulley as well. So mental note not to put this one on backwards, and we're getting there. Alright, it looks like the torque spec for these guys is about 106 inch-pounds. Alright, then over here I'm just going to slap this guy in at about 36 foot-pounds. Being that it's the same size as those and it's going into the block. Alright, I haven't torqued down the motor mounts yet, so I'm just going to try and put these guys in on each side about finger tight. Alright, so I got the belt on and routed here. I'm not sure if one of these pulleys is the wrong size. The only pulleys that I really use is the crank pulley and this idler pulley. The rest of these are all new accessories. And this belt was on really tight. Like I really struggled to get it on. So I'm not really sure if if I needed a bigger belt or what. I feel like I've changed a belt before and it wasn't that hard. But like that's the whole point of the tensioner. But I got it on here. On some of these pulleys where there's no grooves, I'm a little concerned that it's not centered, but hopefully it'll just kind of center itself. If you're going to do this, my advice to you would be to start on the water pump. So route it and then do it over the water pump. Reason being is these guys have grooves on them, or little side flanges, and you can't get the belt over that flange once it's taut. Whereas these pulleys right here don't have those side pieces. They're smooth, and this one's kind of beveled, so like once you kind of get it on there a little bit, you can just tap it on or something. So definitely got to do it with one of these 2 pulleys. I found it easier with the water pump because the water pump's big enough where you can get it over that bevel kind of, and then you can kind of hammer it from there. Whereas this one I couldn't even get it on at all. Alright, then we're going to go ahead and get this dipstick tube out of the way. Alright, well actually I think I got it. I went from this in between the second and third runner to the third and fourth runner, and I'm realizing now I was trying to have it pointing forward, but if I point it up some more, this might actually be right here. Alright, so I just had to kind of jimmy it in there. Looks like this thing mounts on with the headers. Honestly, I thought it was supposed to mount up there. Oh, it might actually. Because that's the bolt I have, is to go right there. Alright, so I'm just going to torque this guy to about 20 foot-pounds. It's a 15, so it probably could go to 36, but it's not holding nothing too important, so... Man, I'm ready to see some oil go into this thing. I'm going to slap the oil filter on there real quick. So I just took some oil. I'm just going to run it around the lip a little bit. Alright, so I want to get some oil in this thing, see if it leaks. Apparently this thing can hold up to about 6 quarts. So I'm just going to start at about 3 while I work on some other things. Let this sit in the pan. And basically if I end up having to drop the pan for something, I don't want to lose all my oil. I also want to see if that oil block-off cap down there leaks. The next thing I want to slap on here is the intake now. Alright, so I've got all the intake manifold bolts started by hand. My book over here says to wait because there might be other brackets that bolt onto this. I'm not really sure what other brackets I'll have bolting on, so I'm just going to torque it down for now, and if I have to loosen one up down the road, it should be alright. I'm going to start at 44 inch-pounds and go around, and then I go up to 89, I think. I've got a torque pattern that I'm going to follow. I'll find a picture of it on Google and throw it up on the screen. Alright y'all, so the next thing I'm going to be working on here is getting the fuel rail set up. I've got my new fuel injectors here from FIC Fuel Injector Clinic, and I got the old stock ones here. I'll throw a picture up on the screen of what they look like side by side. So this right here is my driver's side fuel rail. I had them marked earlier. I don't really know what I'm looking at here. I don't know what this is. This is the crossover from one rail to the other. So I know what that is, and I guess I got my feed and my return here. This one's a little bit smaller, so I'm going to assume that this is my return. I've never done anything with fuel like lines and stuff before, so I'm kind of learning here. But it looks like this right here is where this connects. So I don't know if I need a special tool or whatever, but I feel like this fitting right here should pop off of this rail, and I should be able to reuse pretty much all of this. Except for this, I have no idea what this is right here. But I'm going to start by getting all these clips, all the old injectors off. I'll spray some WD-40 up in here because these things are really hard to get out. The O-rings are like seized inside there. So I'm going to start by getting those out. These clips are really nasty. I'd like to just hit them with some spray paint real quick, sand them down, just, you know. These came out way easier than the ones I took out dry earlier. So I don't know if you saw that or not, but basically these just go on there like that, and they'll slide right up against it, and they'll basically hit these tabs on the inside that'll let it release from that flange. So that is a 3/8 and 5/16. These are just little, like a little tool set that I picked up from AutoZone. Alright, yep, so I'm just going to pre-curse this by saying I have no idea what video I'm in right now. No idea what video all this fuel stuff's about to be a part of. But to switch gears, as I just finished working on the engine, I'm going to start getting this sending unit ready. We've already put the fuel pump in, we've already put the hose clamps on, now we're just looking at the electrical here. So we've got this wire that needs to connect to that and go out the top, and I went out and I bought a bulkhead fitting on Amazon. Looks like this. So you got basically a piece that'll go on the top. You drill a hole. This nut on the bottom will secure it. There's a little O-ring in here. Will secure it, and then your wires will go through the middle, and then you have another nut here on top. That will crush this little rubber piece inside and make it tight on the wires. What I want to look at right now is where on the sending unit do I want to put my holes at. So on the sending unit we have a feed line that's going to be the biggest one with the nut on it or flare on it. We have our return line that's going to be the smaller one. Then I believe this one up here that's really big, I believe that's a vent. That might go to your EGR. And then this fourth smallest one here is a little vent tube to your filler neck. So when you're pouring gas in, the reason it doesn't bubble back up is because there's this vent tube that kind of goes around. It's like pouring out of a water bottle or something. If you have a vent, it'll go faster. So that's what that guy is. So I don't really know that I can get rid of any one of these. That's kind of why this is a dilemma, because I didn't realize this bulkhead was going to be so large. So the only place it looks like it might kind of fit is in between these wires and right here. And it's right there on this lip. So we have a lip here. Then if you look on the inside, I just can't tear up that lip. So if I trace this guy out there, I don't know if you can tell, but it goes to about right there. So this might be alright. I'm going to start with a small drill bit and try to work my way up on this. So I'm realizing that this spot right here won't work. I drilled through and I just hit this thing. I don't know why I didn't realize that was going to happen, but that won't work. Alright, so for a quick update, I went into another part out and I picked up a new set of fuel rails. My old set, as you can see here, had the feed and the return because it had a regulator built into the fuel rail. Whereas the ones I just picked up, so this is like 99 to 03, and then 04 plus, they switched to an external fuel regulator. So this crossover only has the feed line in it, and these rails do not have the internal regulator. So the reason I did this is because some of the guys on Facebook said that this would default to 58 psi if I just blocked it off. I don't know if they meant if I just blocked the return rail or what, but they said it would basically give me issues if I did that. So I wasn't trying to get wrapped up in all that and deal with leaks or anything, so it's just easier to go swap the fuel rails out. I'm about to clean up the crossover. I'm going to paint it black, clean up the fuel rails, and we'll start getting the injectors mounted. Alright, so I'm going to start reassembling the fuel rails here. I've cleaned these up a little bit. They're a little faded. There's not too much I can do about them being faded unless I paint them, and I don't really want to paint them. I got my crossover tube painted though. I freshened it up, hit it with some black paint, and then I cleaned up the little fuel injector clips. So they're just like bare steel, and then I clear coated them. I figured if I paint them black, they would get scratched up on the installation, and then they just look bad. So I figured just clear them so they don't rust and call it a day. So what I'm going to start doing here is I'm going to take my injectors. I'm going to start installing them into the rails. They've got these little orange clips on them that I'm going to pull off of all of them because I think that's where the clip's going to go. And then I'm going to take some oil. So I'm going by the rule of thumb, never put an O-ring in dry. So I'm going to put some oil around these lips to get them in there. Some people use silicone for this, and I've read online that it's not what you want to do. You want to use something petroleum based that will dissolve in gasoline. So if you use motor oil, that'll dissolve in gas and you're good to go. But if you use something like silicone, it may clog your injectors, is what I've read. Should be able to just shut this guy up. Okay, so it actually looks like these orange clips can stay on. Alright, so I think I got this focused in a little bit. So when I'm putting these new injectors in here, it doesn't really go in that far. It kind of popped in a little bit, but it's really not in there that far. It looks like if you look at the base here, you got this plastic top. So it really only went in as far as the silver piece. So you got this top groove right here, and that's what I have the clip on. So instead of coming down here to the orange one like I thought I would be, I'm actually up here at the blue one, and I got the clip in like this. So basically these grooves right here will grab the bottom of the clip, and then the top of the clip, these empty sides, will grab the side of the fuel rail. Alright, so now I'm just going to run all these injectors on real quick. Alright, so the way I'm telling the difference between the passenger and the driver's side rails is that the passenger side has the bolt hole in line with it, whereas the driver's side has it like perpendicular. And I'm also going to put a dab of oil on the bottom O-rings as well. Okay, I got one, so they do fit. They just need to be jiggered a little bit. Alright, so I got this side started by hand and finger tight. Alright, and then these guys are both going to get torqued to 89 inch-pounds. Alright y'all, so I got one last thing to go on the motor. Got myself a little oil cap here. It'll go right into the valve cover. I think that's it for the motor, y'all. I mean, all I have to do at this point is pull out the harness and start plugging things up. But I mean, that's that's it right there. I will, we will get into fluid lines like oil cooler lines and transmission lines down the road. But I mean, this motor is ready to run. I just need to hook the harness up and connect some fuel. Alright, well actually I messed up and forgot to install the crossover. So it looks like you have to install this crossover before you torque everything down. It doesn't just bolt on top, it uses the same bolts. And then I have to unbolt the other side as well because it has to be aligned properly. It looks like the fuel rails are sitting too narrow right now for the crossover to fit. So I'm going to see if I can't push them out a little bit. Alright, going to dip my finger in some oil again, oil these O-rings as well. I did reuse these O-rings, I don't have new O-rings for it, but hopefully it's fine for now. So I don't know how this goes on there, like that, or... Alright, so looking at some other pictures of another stock truck, it looks like it goes with the edges up, so the middle part's down and then the sides are up. I don't have a torque spec or anything for this. I'm not going to crank down on it because it obviously is a small screw going into plastic here. Camera cut off, but I basically just screwed these guys in snug, and now I'm going to torque these all back down to 89 foot-pounds. Or inch-pounds, yeah, don't don't do 89 foot-pounds on this. Alright, so I just realized I wasn't recording audio, but I'm getting started on the Terminator harness. I stopped, I went through and read all the directions. I want to get started on the harness before the fuel pump because I want to see what all of our electrical looks like, if I'm missing anything, if I need to go out and buy any pieces. Like, I want to make sure the fuel pump wiring's good, if I need to go buy any fuses or anything to get that started. I know for the battery I'm probably going to have to go get some terminals or whatever for this thing to bolt up to. So, just going through and plugging things up. Alright, so the harness does come with its own Bosch oxygen sensor. It comes pre-threaded with some anti-seize on it. The Schoenfeld headers have a bung hole on either bank, so I can use either or. I think this side has a little bit more space than the passenger side, so I'm going to run it in on this side. And I'll have to get a block off for the other side, it looks like. Alright, so I just got it hand tight, and then I probably went like 1/8 of a turn with the wrench. Now we're just going to take the O2 connector and drop it over. There is plenty of cord here. So a lot of this wire will probably end up hanging over the trans here. I'm a little concerned about first startup because you got the flex plate with nothing covering it. So I don't want any of these wires to droop down into the flex plate while it's exposed. Alright, let me show you what I'm rocking with right now. I think I got most of it figured out. I've got all my injectors wired up. I went all the way around. I went under the fuel rail. I've got my coil wires plugged into the harness. So you got your even as your passenger side, your odds, your driver's side, more coil wires. I've got this pack of sensors over here. So we've got my coolant temp sensor plugged in. So then we also have a fuel. It says fuel. It's too bright for you to read it. So that'll tell you your fuel pressure if you have the sensor, but I don't have that sensor, so that's useless. We have IAC and TPS. Those are for drive-by-wire systems or drive-by cable, and I have drive-by-wire, so I won't be using those. And then we have a MAT sensor here. It says this is required, but that's like it's a that goes on your intake, like your intake tube. Like I don't have that right now, so I can't really plug that in. Once I do run my full intake, I'll probably have to get it. So I've got those. I've got the O2 sensor plugged in down there. If you go on the back side, I've got the crank wire plugged in down there. I've got it routed as good as I can away from these headers. That's why it has that silver wrap on it, because it runs right through the headers. Nothing else I can do about that really. I got my oil pressure sensor and my cam sensor plugged in back here. I do have a mess of wires ran back here. That's probably where it's going to get kind of ugly, is like behind the intake is where everything kind of comes back to. Not much I can do about that right now. I'm just going to try and hold everything up out of the way until we get the transmission in there. So then we get to these loose wires here. So we've got 3, 4, and 5 loose wires. We've got the wire for our handheld, and then we've got an input and an output harness. So these are for like additional sensors that you want to monitor, or like outputs for like electric fans or any other, like whatever you can imagine, really, just inputs and outputs. So looking at these wires, the red wire, this thick red wire right here, is what powers your fuel pump and your injectors. So you want to make sure that goes straight to the battery. You've got this blue and white wire, which is a tach output, so basically it'll tell you what you're revving up to. It should go to your gauges. You got this green wire, so this is what actually goes to your fuel pump. You can use it to trigger a relay, or you can use this wire itself to power your fuel pump. And then if you go down here, the small black wire is a chassis ground, and then this red and white wire is a switch 12 volt. So this is like your key on. I'm not sure what my next step is here. I'm going to kind of leave everything as it is for the moment. I'm going to go look at the fuel pump. I'm going to write down what I think I need. So basically there's also 2 grounds behind the heads. There's supposed to be a ground on each cylinder head that need to go in. And then I'm also going to have to start looking at the old truck harness for this, because I don't have anything that goes from like I'm going to have to figure out like my alternator wiring and everything, because I don't have anything for that either. So basically I'm going to need a wire that goes from the battery to the engine block, and from the alternator to the battery, etc. So I'm going to figure that out real quick. Alright y'all, so here's kind of my current thought process for the fuel pump wiring. You have this stock harness here, or this stock bulkhead, and people on Facebook have told me if I try to basically repin these wires, I would burn it up. So what I'm thinking the easiest option may be to do here is depin it, take this stock bulkhead off, and drill it out for my new bulkhead. And if I depin these wires, and if they have enough slack in them, this sending unit wire and this factory ground, if I can push those out, then I can actually, I'll just splice them on the outside of the tank. Alright, then you should be able to take one of these pin terminal tools. This set was like 15 bucks on Amazon. And just slide this in here and start depinning it. Okay, so I've got these 2 pins out now. Kind of want to reroute this a little bit and see how much slack I have. Honestly, well, not a whole lot. So neither of these guys really have a lot of slack. I basically have to crimp them right at the end of the bulkhead, and I don't think I want to do that. So I think I've got it figured out now. So I've been looking into it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these 2 wires, and I'm going to splice them in the fuel tank, and then I'll just take this factory bulkhead off, and I'll drill it out and make room for my own bulkhead. And then I'll be able to run my 2 fuel pump wires, and then this sensor wire and this ground wire all through the same bulkhead. Okay, so looks like there's some kind of lock washer. You probably could have just pulled this off. Now I'm going to save this O-ring that came on the stock bulkhead. And look at that. Alright, so I've got it in. I got it just big enough where I can start threading this in. I have the O-ring on the outside just because that's how the factory one came. The factory one had the O-ring on the outside. So I'm just going to do the same thing. Alright, so if I reuse the stock wiring without splicing, this is about how much slack I'd have coming out of that fitting. It's like a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch, so it's really not going to work. I'm going to take the old harness, I'm going to take the old fuel pump, take those old fuel wires and solder them onto these ones. That way I know they're like in-tank, like fuel resistant wires, and I won't have to worry about it. And then I can run these out. Alright, now I'm going to go blow all this off with some air, get the metal shavings off of it. This thing down here has gotten kind of nasty from being pushed around on the workbench. I'm going to go blow it out and then mount it in the tank. Alright y'all, so I'm going to get started on getting these 2 wires cleaned up and ready. I've been practicing my soldering a little bit with some old wires I had laying around. Just going to strip these back and get them soldered. Only thing I'm kind of worried about is these 2 wires are 2 very different sizes. Hopefully that's not an issue. Alright, so the next thing I've got here is some heat shrink I picked up from a local speed shop. I was doing a bunch of research on polyethylene versus PTFE versus PVC heat shrink for the gas tank. I'll throw a picture up on screen of what this is. You can get it at Fastenal. This is actually just the polyethylene or whatever how you say it. But my tuning shop assured me this would work in the fuel tank, so this is what we're going to run. So I'm actually going to double layer it as well, so I'm going to cut this guy in half. Alright, so this heat shrink is not going to fit through the bulkhead that I have, so I'm just going to have to take this slack that I have, and that'll be the only piece that gets to stick out here. So I will have to solder on some more wire or do some kind of connection pretty close to the fuel pump, but this will work. Now, as far as how I'm actually going to fit all these 4 wires into this bushing, I don't know. I also just realized I have 2 black wires coming out of here now. Oops. I probably should have used a different color. Alright, so this might have been a little dumb, but I took the bushing, I took an X-Acto knife, and I was able to cut the bushing in half through the middle. So hopefully I can use that extra space to get all these wires in there. Just don't cut your fingers while doing that. Has 4 wires to the hat, man. Alright, so it looks like the seal here is caked with old grease. It's rock solid. So I'm going to try and scrape some of that out of there without getting any in the tank so I can fit my fuel pump in the new O-ring. Alright, so I got some new stuff in the mail today. I've got a fuel pressure gauge from Aeromotive that's going to go on the front of this fuel regulator here. And then I've got some -6 ORB to 8, -8 AN, it's an adapter. So basically when I first ordered these, I just ordered a 6 AN male adapter to 8 AN. And that's wrong. These are actually different fittings right here. So so it actually stands for like O-ring something. So the O is for an O-ring fitting. So learn the lesson there. So when you order these, you want to make sure it is ORB to AN or whatever you're running. These are -6 and -8 AN fittings. This right here is an 1/8 inch NPT fitting. So these use an O-ring to seal. This uses Teflon tape or some kind of thread sealant. So I'm going to unbolt this right here or unscrew this and screw this on. I'm going to use Teflon tape. Alright, so it feels a little loose in my hand here. It's 180 out. I'm trying to tighten it down, so I backed it off somehow a little bit. I don't want to try and tighten another 180 and over tighten it. So I'm just going to leave it loose, and if I have to, I'll take it off and start over and try and realign it right. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about here is fuel regulator placement. There's 2 ways to do this. You can put your fuel regulator before or after the rails. Stock applications, and you'll read about this, will use a Corvette regulator backed by the fuel pump, and they'll just run a single rail up there, and it'll be regulated to 58 psi, so everything coming in is already regulated. But the problem with that is when you have fuel coming into a returnless setup, it hits these 2 injectors, then these 2, then it comes over in these 2, and then the last 2. So these guys are last in line to get fuel, and if you're running a high performance setup, fuel won't be even because these injectors will be getting all the fuel. So what high performance applications will do is they'll run dual feeds to their fuel rail. So they'll run a feed and they'll Y it off, and each rail will get an input. Then they'll cross over and they'll have an output. So with that, they're actually putting the regulator after the rails, so that way the regulator just bleeds off any excess pressure, but the injectors will get all the fuel they need. So really, the injectors can really hold up to whatever PSI fuel you want. It's just a matter of what PSI they're injecting at into the cylinder. So if you're just bleeding off the excess pressure, they'll be okay. Like it really shouldn't get past that pressure because this will be constantly bleeding. So to kind of offset, so since I'm running my fuel regulator before the rails, to offset that you want to run bigger line. And you want to put the regulator as close to the rails as possible. That way you're not regulating it back at the rear of the truck. Another reason you want to put the regulator at the front of the truck is because you have to run a vacuum line from the intake to your regulator. So if you were to go boosted or something, you need to basically, as you start drawing more boost, your fuel injection pressure needs to go up. So you'll need that up here as well. Okay, so as far as physical mounting location on the truck, I'm feeling like right in this area, right here. I don't really want to mount it on the firewall anywhere because I don't want to pull the dash, and then I'd be concerned about drilling into something on the inside. So right here, I know I have this little cavity for the windshield wipers. So that's a good spot. So the windshield wiper motor is going to go right there, and this is where the cruise control used to sit. So you can't use. I won't have cruise control with this setup, not for now at least. So I'll just mount this here for now, and I'll keep it out of the way, the brake booster and all this other stuff. It's not the cleanest look, I don't think, because that means I'm gonna have the inner fender like right here. So my lines are gonna have to kind of come up and snake, come in, back down, and then I'll have one going over. So it won't be perfect, but it won't be the worst. Alright, well it's not, tightened down all the way or nothing, but that's about what it's going to look like right there. And then of course I just test fit a few of the fittings. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to start working on here is plumbing these fuel hoses. I'm trying to look at where I want to mount my fuel filter and how I want to run these hoses. Alright, so I might be overthinking this here, but I'm not really sure how to mount the AN hose line to the frame rail. I was originally going to reuse some of these factory bolts that were sticking out, but I have these cushion clamps and they're too large of a diameter to fit in the clamps to hold them. So I did some research. Some people are saying to use tire screws, like thick self-tappers. I don't really know that I want to use self-tappers on my frame. So what I'd like to do is get some nuts and bolts and just reuse some of these factory holes and just kind of bolt everything up without any drilling. But I don't have those right now, and I'm determined to see this truck run. So I'm just gonna zip tie everything for now, and just kind of approximate it, leave some slack in there. That way, when I do go to mount it, I won't have any issues. And then I also have to figure out where I want to mount the fuel pump. The fuel pump I may end up having to drill some holes for. I just ordered a bracket for, or not the fuel pump, the fuel filter. So I just ordered a fuel filter bracket. I'm about to go look at it again and see if there's measurements for the holes. And I'm just going to kind of put that wherever, I'm just going to put the fuel filter bracket wherever it'll kind of line up with some of these holes. If I can reuse one hole and then I'll have to drill another one, then it is what it is. But I'm going to reuse what I can. I'll throw a picture up on screen of the mount I'm getting. I measured the fuel filter, it's about 50 millimeters. And then I looked at the diagram of the mount that I'm getting. And it says that the two mounting holes are about 3.35 inches apart, and that's almost exactly what these are. So these are actually threaded holes. I took the bolts out, so I should be able to reuse the factory mounting holes to mount my fuel filter. Alright, so I got the fuel hose pulled over here. I'm going to start by putting an AN fitting on one side. I'll mount it to the fuel tank, and then I'll run it to the fuel filter, and I'll put a piece of tape wherever I need to cut it at from there. Alright, so I got my hose fitting on here. It's my first time doing a hose fitting like this before. It seems pretty on there. I mean, I don't know, I guess we'll find out when I put some fuel through it. So I routed this about to where the fuel filter is, ran it up. So I'm going to tie this up and then stick some tape wherever I'm going to cut it. Alright, so I've gotten the feed side done. I'm starting to look at the return side, and I realized I messed up a little bit. I've got my E85 flex fuel sensor here that's supposed to go on the return side, and it doesn't look like I ordered any of the fittings for it. So I'm going to run the return side. It's just going to be a home run from there to the tank, but at some point over the next few weeks I'm going to have to come back and cut up the return line so I can stick this guy in here. So at some point I'm going to have to run an input wire from here to the harness. So I'm thinking kind of an ideal spot for this to mount up is going to be like right there on the bottom. That way when I do end up cutting this hose, I can just cut it, and then I'll probably have to get a little shorter hose or something in there. Alright, so the fuel system is plumbed up. Right here, I don't think I showed it on video, but I've got a 5/8 quick connect fitting. I used a little flare wrench right here on the left side, and I just used an adjustable wrench right here and tighten this quick connect up. Y'all saw me do the PTFE fittings. This is still loose right here. I haven't really mounted it. Now that I got all the lines on, it's a little more secure. I wanted to leave some slop in it. That way I could, adjust the lines and do what I needed to with them. The fuel filter's mounted right under the door down here, and then the return is a home run all the way back, and they both come up through right here. These are like 14 millimeter to AN8 and a 16 millimeter to AN8 adapter into an AN8 fitting, and I've gotten those tightened up. So really the next thing I need to do is just start kajiggering with some wiring. So the next thing I need to do is I'm gonna finish filling the motor up with oil. I'm going to start zip tying some stuff out of the way of that flex plate just temporarily. That way we can test fire this thing. I'm going to take this serpentine belt back off. I know I struggled with it getting it on, but when I test fire this motor, I do not want the power steering or the water pump running, because running those dry will probably tear them up. In reality, I probably could have done all this before I put the accessories on. I probably could have test fired it first, but I honestly hadn't realized that at the moment. Alright, so now I'm going to finish putting all the oil in. I didn't put all the oil in at once last time because I wanted to see if the oil pan was going to leak. Doesn't seem like it is, at least with how much oil I put in it. So now I'm going to finish putting the full 6 quarts in. I've got some M10 by 1.5 by 25 millimeter bolts from Home Depot. These are going to be for the 2 grounds on the back of the cylinder head. I'm going to scuff up the surface just a little bit around it. Alright, so the next thing I'm looking at here is actually grounding the motor to the battery. So I went through the old LQ4 harness and I found this in there. So this looks like it went to the battery, positive, negative. Looks like you had a fender ground. This one has this heat shielding on it, so I'm going to assume that that is a positive for the starter. Then I've got this black wire right here. I'm going to assume that that's a engine ground. And then this right here, I'm not sure where this goes. This might have gone to one of the cylinder heads. Alright, so I'm really just going to start fooling around with the wire. I found a small little like 10 or 12 gauge wire in that harness over there. I'm going to plug that up to the starter solenoid. I'm going to start cutting some of this other stuff up. And just, I'll explain it all when I'm done because I'm trying to figure it out as I go. Alright y'all, so fair trigger warning here. if bad electrical work upsets you, you're about to be in for it. I've done some work off camera. I went ahead and I've configured so the electrical on this just to get it started. So I've set up the battery over here on the frame. I've got a battery to block ground. I've got a battery to frame ground. So I got my 2 grounds. I've got my harness, my main power wire from my computer there. I've got a wire going to the starter, so that's the main power wire for it. Then I've got a little loose wire right here. That'll be the starter solenoid that tells it to start. I've got this red power wire right here that goes into the harness. That'll power the injectors. I got a loose wire right here. I'm going to wire nut this with the fuel pump when I'm ready to pump some fuel. And then I've got my main power wire for my fuel pump. So then I've got the painless wiring. So you'll see I got 2 wires coming up. So this is the power wire, but this one controls the relay that powers it. I probably could have cut that out for the time being, but if you come back here, I got my power wire and I got my power wire coming in, and then the relay control wire, then the relay, and then I've got the fuel pump wire coming out. That's over here, and that's wire nutted with the actual fuel pump. I got a ground coming out, so I got the main ground that comes out of there. I got the fuel pump ground, and then I've got the ground for the relay kind of tied in there. So there is 3 wires tied into this spot right here. I just took a Dremel tool and I cleaned up the powder coat a little bit and then sanded it down. Again, it's not my best work, but this is all just momentary, so I can see how this motor fires up. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to do before I fire this thing. I looked around for any sources of friction or heat. I made sure everything's clear. The headers and the flex plate back there, I got it bungee corded up where necessary. There's nothing underneath the truck that can really get caught on fire or nothing. I went ahead and I tightened up the motor mounts. They were all loose, so it shouldn't, vibrate loose. And I think the next thing to do is put some gas in the tank and test the fuel pump, make sure none of the lines leak. Alright, I'll be honest, I'm really nervous right now, but here goes nothing. It should. Oh, there it goes. Ooh, ooh. Alright, so I went and got under the truck. The fuel filter is fine, and everything by the tank itself is dry. So it looks like we're just leaking in here. And now this one's dry. This one's a little wet, but I'm not sure if that's just drippage from this one. Alright, so looking at this, it doesn't look like I have this EFI quick connect fitting on all the way. So I've got the appropriate wrenches now to actually make sure it screws all the way in this time. And we'll see if that fixes our problem here. And then over here, I'm not sure. I'll probably take these off, re-screw them on, and just see if I've left them loose or something. Alright, so I've retightened the fittings. I got them all nice and snug now. I'm going to leave my paper towels under that one. And I'm going to get some more ready this time. And here we go, round 2 with these fittings. Almost. So it looks like this bottom one's leaking, and this top one's leaking from in here. Alright y'all, so I think I fixed the fuel leak for now. I've just kind of gone through and I've tightened up the fittings. I was able to just stick a wrench on here and tighten up the fittings a little bit. I think I just had them on here a little too loose to begin with, and I think we're ready to test fire. Alright y'all, so I was working on getting the drive-by wire set up, but what I'm currently running into is I bought the harness for the newer cars. I bought the LS2 harness, I think, so that way I could run these EV6 injectors and not need an adapter. But what that also means is that the throttle body I have won't work with it. I have the older truck style 8-pin throttle body, whereas the harness came with a 6-pin throttle body. So I'm either going to need to get an adapter or figure something out with my throttle body. Still working on that. Alright y'all, so I've gone through, I've plugged the harness up. I don't have the drive-by wire, so we'll see if we still can't build some oil pressure here, maybe get it started. Everything's plugged in, that's on. I've got the handheld set up, gone through and put my initial tune on. I've pulled my ignition coils. I don't want this thing firing yet. I want to turn it over with the starter first, make sure we build oil pressure. I have the oil pressure gauge pulled up on the Holley thing because I do have an electrical oil pressure sensor instead of mechanical. I've got everything pulled away from the headers and the flex plate, so we shouldn't have any problems.
Force Base in Florida. And then now they. Well, she turns over.
She does. Alright y'all, so I'm not sure what all recorded, but I just kind of want to recap where we were at from last time. I tried turning the motor over, and I had the Holley computer hooked up, and I wasn't getting any oil pressure. It just kept rating 0 or -1 oil pressure. It never changed. And then we also had a problem with the throttle body. Since I bought the newer styled harness for the cars, my truck intake won't work with the harness. So I went out and I bought a So I've gone out and I bought a new throttle body, which is the newer style with the 6-pin connector, whereas my truck had the 8-pin connector. And then I got myself a throttle body spacer that will basically adapt that 4-bolt throttle body to my 3-bolt intake. And then I've got myself a little MPT to metric to MPT adapter, so that'll go in place of the oil pressure sensor. And I've got and then this right here is a oil pressure kit, gauge kit. So it's a tool that'll monitor mechanical oil pressure. Alright, so I was able to get the throttle body off easy enough. It's just 3 nuts. I had 1 nut start to round off on me, so I had to use one of those special sockets that like cuts into it. Got it off, and then just this hose right here. Alright, so this spacer comes with this front gasket right here, and then 2 sets of 4 bolts, and then a set of 3 bolts. I'm going to assume since these are the 3 bolts, these are what's going to go into my intake manifold. And then I'm going to guess they sent me a long set of bolts and a short set of bolts, just depending on what kind of intake or throttle body I'm running. So I'll figure that out when I get there. But this is all that came with this spacer. So this throttle body does have an intake gasket right here. I ideally would have probably replaced that, but I didn't know about it till now, so I'm just going to leave it. Alright, so I did not have the star socket that you need to get these out, but a good set of vice grips just got them anyhow. Alright, then this is going to go to 106 inch-pounds. Alright, so definitely need the longer bolts for this application. They just barely stick out a little bit, so those shorter bolts definitely wouldn't have worked here. Another difference between the 2 throttle bodies that I'm noticing is the old one had kind of like a crossover down here for the steam vent, whereas this one does not. I don't know if that's going to be a problem or not, but I'll look into it. So I'm just going to take these to 106 inch-pounds as well. It didn't come with the torque spec, but that's what the original throttle body's at. So I'll just run these to about there as well. Alright, so now with the new throttle body installed, I have the drive-by-wire harness right here. Let me spread this out. We have one plug that's going to go into the computer itself, obviously. We have a red and white wire hanging off here. This is meant to go to a brake switch, so you know your brake lights or something. Basically, whenever the computer sees 12 volts coming off this wire, it's going to limit your throttle to 10%. This is done as a safety feature on the drive-by-wire models. That way you can't brake and hit the gas at the same time. I'm probably going to put a toggle switch on this, that way it works, but I can do burnouts when I want to, so I'll probably put some kind of toggle switch on that. And then right here, we have 2 other plugs. One plug is going to go to our gas pedal, which is electronic, and then one plug is going to go to our throttle body. For the sake of testing, it should just plug in. So now our gas pedal is hooked up, and this should go straight into our new throttle body. Boom. Alright, so one last thing I want to do is get back here to the oil pressure sensor. I'm going to take the electrical sensor off and I'm going to replace it with this gauge right here. I've got a metric to MPT 1/8 adapter here. So I've got an M16 by 1/5 to 1/8 inch adapter. That's going to allow this male fitting to screw directly into the block. And this right here is a quick connect, so I'll just be able to hook up this nice OTC gauge and monitor my oil pressure mechanically. So a brief moment of panic there. I was trying to get this out and my socket just kept slipping and slipping, and I stripped this out. And you know, with the lessons learned with the torque wrench, how I had used a 3/8 torque wrench instead of an inch-pound torque wrench on this, I was actually really terrified that maybe I stripped the block out with this one. But the block's okay. I ended up taking some really thick duct tape, some Gorilla Tape, lining the inside of my socket with it, and then jamming it down over this. And I was finally just able to get this to bite, and I was able to get this sensor out. So cool. We're good to go. No brain-inducing traumas here. Alright, so I am just going to run my adapter in there now. I'm just going to go hand tight. I'm not going to torque down on it or nothing because this is just temporary. Alright, so the NPT stuff, you do have to put some Teflon tape over. So I just put a small strand of it. So the other day I had read online that it might be easier to build oil pressure if I pulled all the spark plugs. So that's what I had gone and done as I went around and pulled all the spark plugs out. That obviously didn't work, at least not with the gauge I was using. But I talked, so that's why everything's unplugged. I'm about to go back through and torque the spark plugs back down, plug everything back in, and clear everything away from the flex plate and headers. But I talked to the engine builder the other day, and he basically told me that he put enough wax or pre-assembly lube in this thing. He told me to just go ahead and start it, and it should be good to run for a few seconds until it builds oil pressure. So he said to just go ahead and start it. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to get this guy ready to test fire. Alright, so I've cleaned everything up. I've got everything away from the flex plate, the headers. I got the motor off the strap and back onto the jack stand. First thing I want to do is I want to test the fuel lines again, make sure one of them isn't going to burst. And then I want to turn it over without ignition again and see if something registers on that oil pressure gauge. And then we're going to hook everything back up and we'll start it. So starting with fuel. So that was a solid 10 or so, 10-15 seconds. Alright, so I've got my handheld right here. It's telling me I need to do a TPS auto set. I'm just going to run back through the whole setup wizard. So I'm going to go into wizards and I'm going to do TPS auto set. Start, slowly press the pedal to the floor, then slowly release. Do this twice. It just opened and closed the throttle body, if you didn't hear that in the background. So now it says TPS auto set was successful, so it should fire now. The fuel pump is not currently connected, and neither is the ignition. So I'm just going to turn it over real quick. I'm going to be watching my oil pressure gauge here to see what happens. Still didn't register any oil pressure there. That is kind of concerning, even with the mechanical gauge. My guy said to just start it, so I guess that's what we're gonna do. If this doesn't shoot up within the first 10 seconds, we're cutting it though. I got a temperature gun here. I'm gonna monitor the temperature of the block and the headers. Make sure we don't get too hot. And then I'm gonna reacquaint myself with my fire extinguisher here. Make sure it's all ready to go. What do we do here? We pull this pin, you pull, aim, squeeze, sweep, right? Oh, I got the jitters now. Oh, it scared the mess out of me. attempt number 2 with this. Hey, we got oil pressure. God dang. Alright, so we are going to go for round 3 with this guy. I went in here and I changed the target idle speed. I don't know what it was at before, but I just set it to like 800, 850 I think. So maybe, I don't really know what's going on here, why I won't start. Oh, it's so hard. Alright, well I'm going to take a break working on this for a minute. I'm going to let the motor cool down. I'm not really sure what needs to happen here, if I just need to keep cranking it, or if I need to try and step it on the gas pedal while I do this, or what. Alright, so I think I'm ready to go for round 3 with this guy. I'm using the headers as kind of my best indication of it cooling off. This is all room temp now, so... The worst feeling in the world has to be talking to the camera for 3 minutes and then realizing your microphone was turned off. What's going on, y'all? If you've made it this far, appreciate you so much. Go ahead and smash the subscribe button right now. There's no way you just watch 2 hours of video and you're not doing that. So to tell you what's going on with the truck right now, I ended up not finishing it this past summer. I got so close. I got the whole front clip back on. I got my oil cooler, my trans cooler on, my radiator on. I got all my plumbing done. Got the gas pedal mounted, and I got the hydro boost swapped in the master cylinder, but I never got to the brake lines. I never got to electrical, like any of the factory electrical. I never got to putting the bed back on. I stopped recording after I test fired the motor. I finished all that, and then I basically left for the year. And just working on the truck anytime soon is just not a realistic option for me. I just want it done. I have a bunch of money into it, so I took it to I took it to a shop. I took it to a family friend. It's over there right now, and they just did the brake lines for me, and they're gonna finish it up for me. They do really good work. So I'm leaving for an internship tomorrow, but it should be done by the time I get back at the end of this summer. So there's definitely going to be more videos on it in the future, whether they be towing videos, drag racing videos, something, I don't know. My internship this summer is actually going to be with Oshkosh Defense. They make armored vehicles for the military. They actually make the successor of the Humvee. They make the JLTV. So I'm going to be working with some of America's finest this year, or this summer, so I'm super excited for that. You know, applying that to this channel somehow, some way. So definitely stick around. I'm going to have some cool content coming up. When the truck's done, I'll definitely be switching my focus to my Jeep and my trailer, and getting to some off-roading events there. Hopefully get some GoPros and actually start putting some cool content on the channel. So if you're not already, man, you better freaking subscribe. If you're this far in this video, you just have to. I appreciate y'all. Abdi out.